Welcome to the Valseth View.
Welcome to the Valseth View with Carolyn Dragseth and Valerie Clark of Valseth Enterprises. Together, they lead a unified consulting firm that blends legal insight with compliance expertise to help organizations strengthen their governance, manage risk, and drive sustainable growth. I'm Chelsea, and today we're launching this new series by exploring what makes Valseth Enterprises different and why understanding the connection between legal and compliance is so critical for modern organizations. Welcome, Carolyn and Valerie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So to start, could you each share a bit about your backgrounds and what inspired you to launch Valseth View?
Okay, sure. I am an attorney, so I have been practicing law for over 30 years. And one of the things that over the course of my practice I've noticed is how compliance and legal is getting closer and closer together. So that was kind of what inspired us to get started with this. I work primarily on the legal side of the house, which is usually when a client has already gotten themselves into trouble. And I also have the privilege of working with Valerie, who works on the compliance side of the house. And I think that that is a great kind of 2-for-1 type of option. So I'll let Valerie tell a little bit about herself.
That was actually very well done, Carolyn. I appreciate that, because as Carolyn meets with people who are normally already in some type of difficulty or trouble, I get to work with them to prevent that from happening. My background is in healthcare and in compliance, with all different types of compliance issues and federal agencies and state agencies. And so what I do is I kind of work with the client and to go through what they need to know about being compliant in their industry. And that's how I got interested in it, was because I like to fix things and I like to see things through. And that is a very important part of compliance, is not just starting it and then saying, oh, okay, I'm done, I'm finished, it's not fun anymore. It's actually doing the work to complete the circle of compliance which is required.
Many executives still use legal and compliance kind of interchangeably. So how do you define the difference between the two?
Well, I think the difference between the two is when you actually involve individuals. Usually, I would say your legal team is traditionally the one that you talk to once you've already kind of committed a faux pas and you need to fix something. So I think the legal team is more on the back end. And what we've seen with the growth of technology and the way that there is kind of a more information available about the particular company a lot earlier on than they used to. We're seeing that legal and compliance have kind of grown closer to work together as like a symbiotic team. So I think that traditionally legal was always on the back end, kind of an afterthought. And I think that what we're seeing now is we're seeing business owners becoming more aware of the fact that they can run into trouble a lot sooner, a lot quicker. And so we've kind of seen the compliance and the legal teams working together instead of kind of working in a vacuum, is probably the best way to put it.
Awesome. And I agree with that. Because the earlier that you can get your compliance people and your legal people in the same room together to have the necessary conversations about what's happening, what's going on, what's needed, then there's a better game plan that people can work from. And then that impacts the training that you do and how you finish with the compliance and legal part of it. And it just gets everyone involved at the beginning.
It sounds like you're moving from just reactive to kind of giving the power of proactivity.
Yes, absolutely.
So Valerie, when you assess an organization's compliance framework, what kind of issues do you focus on that might not come up in a typical legal review?
Of course, it's going to depend upon what type of business it is and if they have any business-specific compliance regulations that they have to follow, or if they are subject to, I'm going to say only, but that's not the correct word, or if they're subject to federal and state regulations. And I look to see, first of all, what is their knowledge? Are they aware of what they are responsible for? Number two, where can I find that information? I need to find it in a policy format. I need to find it in some training records to show that the company has not only made these decisions about compliance and how they're going to meet them, but that they have actually trained their staff to do what needs to be done for compliance, whether that is actually going into the field and looking at something, whether that's actually doing chart reviews, compliance reviews, desk reviews. And then it has to be where I have access to talking with employees in a safe environment, and I can get a feel for what they know and what they're doing to bridge any gaps that may be between what executive management thinks is happening and what is actually happening in the field or with the public.
If an organization doesn't have in-house, like a full in-house legal or compliance department, how can leadership define who handles what and make sure that nothing is slipping through the cracks?
Well, I think it's really important, like Valerie said, to be very proactive. I think that leadership needs to understand that in any business, whether it be a small business all the way through large multinational businesses, there's always going to be a suite of regulations that kind of cover whatever you're doing. And I think it's really important that if they don't have their own in-house counsel, that they engage with either a small attorney or something like our company, where we can kind of get in there and tell them, hey, this is what's going on and this is what you need to make sure that you're covering. I think that a lot of small businesses and businesses that experience rapid growth have a really big problem because they start out absent an in-house counsel or absent a legal team that's walking next to them. And all of a sudden they go from what I would consider to be a small business to a medium or large business. And they don't have all of the necessary kind of what Valerie highlighted, policies in place. They haven't done their internal compliance checks. So it is really important for business to be thinking on these terms so that they can actually create what they need to have in place to be compliant.
Carolyn, can you share an example where there was a compliance gap that led to what was probably avoidable legal exposure and how they could have prevented it?
Sure. I found that we have had a client that was a small business. They were operating within everything that they needed to do for this state. However, they had landed a really big federal government contract, and all of a sudden they were subject to a whole new suite of regulations. Part of what they needed to do was to get their policies and their procedures and their training in place. And that's where we come in with that invaluable service, where we tell them, hey, look, in order to be compliant with everything that you weren't previously compliant with, this is what you need to do. We also help them to create like a remediation plan so that if they are already in, quote unquote, hot water, we're going to be able to work with them through the process so that they don't end up in court or so that they don't end up losing a contract that they won just based on the fact that they don't have what's critical for the company.
Valerie, we hear the phrase culture of compliance a lot. In practice, what does that look like inside of a healthy organization?
That's a great question. And compliance starts from the top. It goes from the top down. And it is something that when you walk into a company or an agency, you can usually get a feel within 5 to 10 minutes of if they are in compliance or not. Some people may not consider this compliance, but it really is. And that is how you greet customers, how you answer the telephone, what you say, whether you put them on hold, how long they stay on hold, because it not only presents an immediate impression of who the company is, but it kind of also makes the customer develop some pretty negative feelings and responses to that. And so by putting, if you see that there is an issue in that significant but minor, seemingly, piece of daily business, then there are some things you can do from a compliance standpoint. You can take a training and train your staff with the people who actually work with the customers, teach them what to say, what not to say, help them hear what they're saying, help them explain more about what the company culture is. And then that is how you do it from a front level standpoint. From a top down standpoint, in your weekly executive meetings, compliance should be sitting in that room. They need to be involved in the conversations of all of the managerial staff, whether it's a financial conversation, whether it's an OSHA conversation, whether it deals with the human resources issue, because compliance touches every piece of the business. And in order to have a culture of compliance, you need to make sure that your employees and your executive management, number one, understand what compliance is, and that they are comfortable talking about compliance. And even more importantly, if they see something that they feel is not in compliance, that they know who to go to and have a real honest conversation without fear of repercussion of reporting or asking about that particular item.
At the beginning of this episode, we talked about many companies have their legal and their compliance operating separately. What kind of risks or inefficiencies tend to surface first?
Well, I think from the legal perspective, if you isolate your legal and you don't have them actually talking with the people who are implementing your policies and who are implementing everything that you need to get done, you're doing your company a disservice because you're kind of separating and disconnecting them. So you're going to have a group of people who know what you should be doing, and then you have the rest of the company who's doing maybe something else. So that's a huge danger, is if you disconnect your legal and or compliance team from the rest of your workforce, what ends up happening is you have a team that doesn't really have the proper knowledge or know-how to be able to do what they need to do. And I think that ties into what Valerie was just mentioning, where she was talking about if your day-to-day employees don't understand what they should be doing to be in compliance with, let's say, for example, a regulation, then it's going to be very hard for you when someone comes in and actually performs an audit or comes in and asks your employees about different things, because they are going to be found non-compliant. Even though maybe your legal and compliance team knew what they should be doing, it's not helpful if you don't create that team atmosphere within the entire organization.
Carolyn, how can legal guidance add value early in the compliance life cycle before there's any sort of audit or before there's a dispute?
Well, I think that identifying, and that's a lot of what Valerie does, and I'll let you kind of take it from there. Identifying what you need to know is super important. And then how do you implement it with your day-to-day line employees? And so if you want to add to that, Valerie,
Sure. From my perspective, the major breakdown by not having compliance and legal together, you can see it off the bat. It's going to be in the communication, in the conversations that you have with your employees. It's going to be in conversations that they have with each other. For instance, if there is a compliance issue that management knows about and they're working very hard and very diligently to try to correct that, if they do not have the avenues in place to make sure that the especially the department it concerns, but if it is a regulation that the whole company needs to be aware of, if they are not putting into place from the very beginning, how are we going to share this? Is it going to be by this particular avenue? Is it going to be by this particular avenue? You have to know up front what needs to be shared and how you're going to share it. And then along with that, you need to work with the departments involved when they receive the information and follow up with them periodically. I would do like every month, and then 3 months and 6 months and 9 months, to make sure that they not only understand what has been taught. If they need a refresher course, you're going to do that, but also, is there anything new from that regulation that has come about since you first notified them? And one of the important things that I want to make sure that I mention is a large part of what compliance does in relation to legal is education. And one of the most frustrating things from a management perspective is you're going to teach the same people the same thing over and over and over. That's just the business. That's not a negative towards the trainers. That's not a negative toward the employees. It's just, it takes a lot to catch on to regulatory compliance because there's so much of it.
You have to hear things how many times? 7 times before it really sinks in? So so finally, for leaders who are listening who want to better align legal and compliance efforts, what's one concrete step they can take this quarter so that they can strengthen that partnership?
Well, from the legal perspective, it's either make sure that you have in-house counsel or that you secure an attorney that's going to be there through the process to help you. I think that some regulations are simple. Some companies can kind of follow. They've been well established. There's a lot of training out there. But I think that if you don't have someone from the legal side who's kind of overlooking what you're doing with your company, it can be dangerous and you can get yourself into trouble. So from the legal perspective, I would say definitely engage with counsel. It doesn't have to be thousands and thousands of dollars endeavor. It can be specific and focused towards a particular thing. And then Valerie, from the compliance perspective, what tips do you have?
From the compliance perspective, it's going to be very important that management has a 100% buy-in and that the compliance director has a seat at the management table, because as I mentioned earlier, the major issue that you're going to see when you don't have legal and compliance working with the other departments is there's not going to be communication. And that is the first indication that you have a serious problem, is when your people don't know what to talk about, or if they're given maybe a tagline in a conversation or in an email, and they still don't know what to talk about. It needs to be part of the conversations that management and supervisors have with their staff during staff meetings. And so communication is one of the most important things in order to have an effective compliance program.
Lots of great information in this episode. So if you need to go back and listen again, do it. Take notes. That wraps up our first episode of the Valseth View with Carolyn Dragseth and Valerie Clark of Valseth Enterprises. To learn more about how their integrated approach helps organizations stay compliant, competitive, and future ready, visit valsethenterprises.com. And on the site, you can find helpful tip sheets that you can download about today's topic. If you found today's discussion valuable, be sure to like, leave a review, and subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next episode. See you then.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.